We are witnessing one of the darkest ironies in economic history. Disasters may kill millions, but opportunity rarely dies with them. The Black Death was no exception. Between 1347 and 1351, the plague devastated Europe and North Africa so severely that it became one of the greatest catastrophes humanity had ever experienced. Cities, villages, and towns disappeared. Entire communities were reduced to silence. People vanished. Families were erased from existence. Nearly half of Europe's population was gone within a few years. Yet in the very center of this immense destruction, something else was unfolding. Quietly, almost invisibly, wealth was being redistributed. And the scale of this redistribution was so vast that it makes modern recessions seem insignificant by comparison. Old elites were collapsing. In their place, new fortunes were emerging. Some of the most influential dynasties in European history were rising directly from the ashes of catastrophe. It is deeply unsettling to acknowledge this. During a pandemic that ended tens of millions of lives, certain families became wealthier than ever before. But this is the uncomfortable pattern of economic history. When a system collapses, someone always gathers the fragments and rebuilds from them. The Black Death did not merely weaken existing structures, it shattered them completely. The plague did not only kill peasants, merchants, and craftsmen. It eliminated heirs, landowners, and banking rivals. It extinguished noble lines that had endured for centuries. And when old wealth loses its custodians, new ones inevitably step forward. Not because they are inherently immoral, but because in a fractured world, ambition becomes one of the strongest driving forces. Financial history is where money, power, and time intersect, and nothing is ever as simple as it appears. To understand who truly became rich during the Black Death, you must imagine Europe at its most vulnerable moment. Ships arriving in Genoa filled with dead sailors. Church bells falling silent because there was no one left to ring them. Entire regions abandoned almost overnight. This is typically where documentaries conclude, with horror and despair. But for economic history, this is where the real story begins. The consequences were not temporary. They were structural. The plague did not only take lives, it dismantled hierarchies. Labor shortages destabilized the very foundations of feudalism. Abandoned lands created massive property vacuums. Trade networks collapsed and required reconstruction. Banks failed as unpaid debts overwhelmed financial systems. And within every one of these voids, new beneficiaries emerged. The essential question was not simply whether people became rich, but who, and by what mechanisms. The answer requires following a path many historians overlook: inheritance, consolidation, accumulation of influence, and quiet opportunity in a world where a significant portion of competitors had vanished. One of the first major revelations is this. Many of the most recognizable names in European history, those associated with art, finance, nobility, and empire, owe their ascent to the economic vacuum created by the Black Death. Nowhere was this more visible than in Florence. By the late 14th century, as the plague receded only to return in waves, Florence transformed into a city of survivors. Competitors had died. Trade networks had fractured. Banking houses struggled to remain solvent. Into this environment stepped Giovanni de' Medici. He was not born into the highest nobility. He was a banker with exceptional timing and strategic awareness. In 1397, he founded the Medici Bank at a moment when Florence's financial sector was still destabilized by recurring outbreaks. Many traditional banking families had lost heirs, partners, or entire operational branches. Once powerful houses such as the Bardi and Peruzzi, formerly dominant in international finance, had been reduced to shadows of their former influence. Giovanni recognized the opening and filled it. The Medici bank secured highly profitable contracts, including managing papal finances, an opportunity unlikely to have existed had established rivals remained intact. The transformation extended beyond banking. With fewer nobles and merchants competing for political influence, the Medici family moved into positions of civic and economic authority almost by default. Had the plague not occurred, they might have remained a successful Florentine family. Instead, they became patrons of Renaissance art, producers of popes, rulers of Tuscany, and architects of modern financial practice. Florence was not unique. Milan underwent an even more dramatic shift. The Visconti family did more than survive the plague. They capitalized on the power vacuum it created. Noble families frequently died without heirs during a pandemic, with mortality rates approaching 60%. Their lands reverted upward in the feudal hierarchy or were absorbed by opportunistic rivals. The Visconti mastered this dynamic. Bernabo Visconti expanded Milanese territory aggressively, incorporating estates left vacant by extinction. His successor, Gian Galeazzo Visconti, combined strategic marriages with the demographic upheaval of the period to accumulate enough land and influence to be crowned the first Duke of Milan in 1395. In another era, such territorial growth might have required centuries of warfare. After the Black Death, it occurred within a single generation. When aristocratic lines collapse all around you, becoming heir to multiple estates becomes less extraordinary and more statistically probable. Across the Channel, England witnessed the rise of a new social class, the gentry. These were families without noble titles who suddenly possessed sufficient land and capital to become political actors. They were not as famous as the Medici or the Visconti, yet their stories are equally revealing. The Paston family of Norfolk began as modest landowners, but as neighboring estates lost heirs during plague waves, the Pastons acquired property at remarkably low prices or through legal claims. Their sudden wealth granted them access to education, courts, and royal patronage. Over generations, they evolved into influential power brokers. Their ascent illustrates how demographic collapse could generate unexpected upward mobility. Meanwhile, in the Baltic region, the Hanseatic League demonstrated how crisis could be transformed into commercial advantage. This was not a nation-state, but a network of merchant cities stretching from Lübeck to Riga and beyond. During the plague, European demand became volatile. Grain harvests declined. Maritime trade faltered, and prices for essential goods surged. Hanseatic merchants responded swiftly, sourcing grain from less affected eastern territories and selling it at high margins in plague-stricken western cities. In doing so, they expanded their fleets, secured monopolies over critical resources, and strengthened their political influence within city councils. The broader pattern becomes clear. Wherever death created an economic void, someone stepped forward to occupy it. In some regions it was noble families, in others merchant dynasties. In still others, ecclesiastical institutions accumulated vast landholdings as estates passed to the church through inheritance or donation. At the same time, not all beneficiaries were elites. Labor shortages dramatically increased bargaining power for surviving workers. Wages rose. Serfs negotiated improved conditions or abandoned feudal obligations entirely. Apprentices advanced more rapidly. Social mobility increased in ways rarely seen in medieval Europe. Though this did not produce elite-level wealth, it marked one of the closest approximations to a working-class economic surge in the Middle Ages. Ultimately, the Black Death reveals a deeper economic principle. Crises do not eliminate wealth. They reassign it. Catastrophe does not distribute resources evenly. It reshuffles ownership. This lesson repeats throughout history, from financial collapses to modern pandemics. Wealth changes hands. Power consolidates in new forms. Structures dissolve and reassemble. The Black Death did not simply end lives. It reordered the architecture of European power and economics. It accelerated transformations that would shape the Renaissance and the emergence of early modern Europe. And its most enduring lesson is stark but clarifying. Disasters are not equalizers, they are accelerators.